Hmm. All right, awesome. So I guess this thing is ready. All right, awesome. So I guess I'm going to get started. So this is a live stream. I'm doing this for the first time, I think, out here. I'm not sure if everyone can hear me all right. But basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw some maps. I was bored tonight, so really nothing better to do than to draw maps. So I guess I'll just kind of, I was thinking about leaving this to more or less some of the chat to kind of suggest states to go over. But beyond that, I guess I'll kind of just show what I've got over here on the side. So I've got a Daily Editor-in-chief app up. I've got ready to do a number of states. So I think I'm going to start with North Carolina. Oh, the audio is echoing? All right, let me check that. Actually, you know what? Start with North Carolina. Oh, the audio is echoing? All right, let me check that. All right, is this work, or is this better? Let me know if this is better. I've just taken out the AirPods and seen if this is going to work fine. So I've got Daily Editor-in-chief app up. I'm just going to start with North Carolina, assuming the audio is not bad. Anyone in the chat comment on the audio just to make sure I'm doing this right? I haven't tried the setup on YouTube yet, so the audio issue is kind of strange. Okay, much better. Awesome. So I guess I'll start with North Carolina. They added this feature recently, which was the citizen voter voting age population, which is awesome. You can kind of use it in place of voting age population, although you can't really estimate it as well, because the CVAP statistic, it only counts citizens. So it doesn't count non-citizens, even though non-citizens count towards voting, or count towards the number of people in a district, right? So, so you kind of have to adjust it just a little bit. But really, this isn't a huge issue, because you can just always estimate it down a little bit. Like right here, you see the total population is 27,000. Citizen VAPs 22,000, and it's a little bit wider if you look at the citizen population. So not a big deal to worry about there. But I'm going to go ahead and start drawing, I guess, for North Carolina. I'm going to try to draw like a fair map, I guess. Actually, I'm going to turn off partisan statistics. So I don't have that to judge. And then maybe I'll draw like a gerrymander. Let's see how this goes. But one thing I like about this number is that if you notice this, these counties fit basically perfectly into a single district, only 333 people over, which is, that's pretty good as far as things go. So I'll start with that. Actually, while we're here, I'm going to see if there's a studio feature, see what this is.
No, that doesn't do anything. So I wish I could figure out a way to have my face up there at the same time as this, but I think the map is kind of more important. So let's see. The district that starts the state is 11, and then the other district that anchors the other end of the state is 1. I'm just going to go off of where I think the districts were. So this one has to be a majority, not majority-minority, but it's got to be, you can't draw G.K. Butterfield is the thing. So really, you only got limited options as to what you can do. I think the current one goes into Wayne County, which is not ideal. I think there are problems with doing that. But regardless, I think I'll throw in Nash County, and then these right here. Yeah, I think that's fine. Oh, perfect. There we go. And this one, the citizen VAP is 52 to 41, or 44. So it's not quite majority-minority. And if you actually take the actual citizen number and remove that, it's probably closer to 50, 51%, which is what the current district is at. So I think that one works right there. This is a bug I don't like in Days Redistricting app, but sometimes something vanishes. So let's see how this goes. Next seat has to be in Charlotte. It has to be a Charlotte-based seat. So there's 2 ways you can do this. So the city lines, Charlotte ends basically up around here. Yeah, I like that 11 as well. Technically, I think Democrats would like a little bit more because Boone is in there. But on the other hand, it goes through the 2 most Republican counties in the state. So it's not really a huge deal. And also, it makes more sense geographically if you look at what the mountains look like. Like, if you look at a map of NC topography, I think I can know how to find this real quick. Yeah, so if you look at this right here, like, this is all mountain up through here. So really, that's the ideal way to do it. I don't see anything wrong with drawing Durham into the 1st. The problem with drawing Durham into the 1st is that it's been used for a gerrymander, right? So let's just get rid of this 1st for a second because I know how to draw this thing. So let's say draw Durham in here, right? And then do what the old seat did, because we actually drew Durham in for years. Republicans and Democrats alike did that. So let's just say you do something like this. This is a little bit over, but it results in an actual majority-minority seat. The problem is the Supreme Court doesn't think this is fair, or the state Supreme Court, so you can't really do it. And also, personally, I don't have an issue with a seat like this, where it does this and then spurs off into, takes, the lower part of Raleigh right here. So this would be an alternative to a Raleigh seat. Is if you were to draw this right here, just kind of get all of southern Wake County, Apex area, Cary, just throw it all into that seat. And then you still have, we need to draw a little bit more out. Right, so now red is good. And then you got this right here. And so just draw some of this out to kind of even out the population in Wake. No, that wouldn't work. Yeah, in theory it screws, in theory what you should have around here is you should have a black seat in the northeast, right? Then you have a seat that's Durham and Raleigh, or Durham and Chapel Hill, all this area, and then one that's just Raleigh area. There is one upside to drawing a map this way if you're a Democrat. So in theory, what you could do, so you have this right here, is you could make a more competitive district around the coast. That's in theory. So you could just have Like I'm, go set to here. And let's kind of get rid of the hide voting data and see what it looks like. So notice this would have been a seat that voted for McCain by 5. So in theory, it's more swingy. The problem is there's just issues with drawing like that in terms of communities of interest and in terms of other things. So, I mean, the thing is, we did draw Durham in for years. Democrats and Republicans both did it. That was when the seat was supposed to be strictly drawn as a VRA seat, which it's not anymore. So, I mean, there's only so much you can do with that area, right? Yeah, the seat would be safe Republican now. It would have been, Walter Jones would have been safe in it as well. So we've got these seats done. Let's go back to Charlotte, because I was working on Charlotte. So I like to draw northern Mecklenburg County out rather than pushing into more of Charlotte, just because I think Charlotte should be contained kind of in its own district for the most part. And you can disagree with that if you want. You can say, oh, you draw it up into Uptown, you know. You can draw something with, sorry. Let me pull this up over here. So like you could just draw all the white areas in up to, Uptown Charlotte up there. But I just don't like doing that because really it doesn't make a ton of sense. So I tend to draw Huntersville out of the Charlotte seat. And so the result is, draw a little bit of the Charlotte suburbs in here in. This would mean that Dan Bishop would be drawn out of the seat, but I don't particularly care about who's in it or not. And so now you have this seat right here, which also, strictly speaking, isn't a VRA seat because it's only 42% black. That's kind of the baseline of what you start with. Now, yeah, I saw Nick in the comments saying that Orange and Durham should be together. I wouldn't call it a vote sink so much because there's plenty of Republican vote sinks in the state as well. I mean, pretty much every district in the state is going to be a vote sink to some degree. So if you were to draw, for example, one alternative you could do is if you didn't want to do the vote sink strategy, right? You could just you could have Durham in a separate seat and then kind of throw in the airport. Where's the airport? You could draw in the airport area and then kind of snake around up through here. And then draw in more of the minority areas. In theory, you could do something like that, and that would kind of differentiate the Mecklenburg, or not the Mecklenburg, the Durham from Chapel Hill areas. The problem is at that point you still have to draw Chapel Hill into Wake County, which that doesn't make a ton of sense either. Like, so you have this, right, and then so you draw that part of, Wake already fits into a county in and of itself. So really it's not ideal. And then of course you have Chapel Hill, which throwing Chapel Hill in with the areas around it, the rural areas or Republican areas, is just kind of wrong. I don't really like doing that. But what I find works best is doing this. Doing something along this line right here. There we go. No, actually that's a little bit too much. There, so just draw a little bit out of Alamance. And so I like this district design. I don't think Alamance is going to be happy. Alamance County is a Republican-leaning county. I don't think they'd be happy to be in this district. But really it's not about being happy or not. It's kind of just about how it's drawn. And then at that point you kind of go into Wake County. Draw in all of Raleigh. And then some of Cary, or try to see how much of Cary I can remove, because I don't like splitting cities when possible. Let's see. There we go. I think that works. Yeah, so most of Cary is not in the Wake district. Durham, Orange, Alamance, Caswell, Purcell, and Granville. Oh, yeah, that's the exact same one I drew. Yep. Yeah, that's the one I prefer. Another alternative would be to draw Chathaman, which is probably more closely connected to Orange County than these other ones are. So, like, the alternative design is to do this, is to draw that out, put Nash in with that seat, and then kind of just draw in that right there. That's another way you could do it. Any way you do it, some people are going to be unhappy. So there's nothing really much you can do there. The reason I like this one is I think Franklin County right here kind of belongs more with Wake in terms of, because Wake Forest kind of crosses over into it. It's a good fit in my opinion. Another one I like to do is I like to stretch along the coast, because right now the seat basically you have a seat that runs from the coast all the way up to Wake County suburbs, which is just, I don't like that design at all. So what I like to do is chop off a New Bern right there. So you got those counties in there, the inner areas of the coast. And then draw kind of a snake connecting. So you've got a coastal district that stretches pretty much the entirety of the North Carolina coast. Actually, the entire, like, literally all of it. And then that way, you can have a seat that stretches the interior of the state, right? So you can have one that just goes like that. And I think that's perfect. I think that works really well. Especially if you're going to draw what you should draw, which is to stretch along southeastern North Carolina like this. And then there you go. So then you just kind of got to grab a little bit right here. But the big thing is it keeps the coast separate from the interior of the state, which I like. So you got this interior coastal area. I'll turn off the county and city line so you can kind of see it. So this stretches all of the outer banks and some of the inner banks right there. And then it connects by the outer banks to the southern parts of the coast. I just like that because it keeps the coast in one district, and then these interior areas in 7 kind of get in a seat that makes a little bit more sense than usual. Let's go back over to the west, because I've been experimenting with a way to draw Charlotte that I think is interesting, that could be useful compared to other ways to draw it. So, looking at the topography map, you can see kind of this area right along here. So what I like to do is try to keep the Hickory area into one district. So try to keep this area right here, just kind of the foothills of the mountains, into a single district, and then kind of grab a little bit of northern Iredell County, which is tied economically with here. I'm from the Catawba County area, so I'm familiar with this, kind of what this should be. So you got this district stretching up to the mountains, or the foothills of the mountains. And then we've got, have a seat that kind of stretches like this. Takes the northern part of Mecklenburg County. So then move 8 over here. Let's see. I'm going to draw Salisbury out of this. This is kind of the border of the Charlotte Metro anyway. So now, perfect. So now we've got this. So draw this area right here. stretch up, take in the part of Kannapolis. And then there you go. So you're kind of stretching across you're splitting the northern and southern Charlotte suburbs instead of like that. So Nick, you're saying you drew a district that was a triangle with Bladen, Harnett, and Scotland County at the tips. Yeah, I don't like putting a Harnett in just because it kind of dilutes the majority-minority seat. But yeah, Gastonia is Charlotte exurbs. I don't like to talk about Gastonia. Most people don't like to talk about Gastonia. It's just not a great place to live. But yeah, it is connected with the Charlotte area. I mean, it's right along, it's not a long drive. You can see kind of it's pretty close to the airport. It is tied to it, and also the areas around here, Rock Hill, Lancaster County, are tied economically with Charlotte as well. So another way you could do this is instead of having that portion of 8 be in that county, you just drop it off to Montgomery County right here, and then kind of chop off a little bit of the west. And then so now you got that east-west split, which I think makes sense. So that leaves this district, which you need one that's Winston-Salem and Greensboro. Yeah, there's a reason I rag on Gastonia. It's even the bad parts of North Carolina talk about. There's a lot of drugs. I think people have called it G-Town in the past. Meth, just other sorts of things. It's not pleasant. It's not a pleasant area to live in. It's a Republican area too, from what I remember. So it's like you're just making fun of Republicans by doing it, which I'm fine with in this occasion. So what I'm going to do with this district with 6 is there's 2 ways you can do it. So we got to get these 2 counties up here, which are part of the Piedmont Triad metro area. So we got to drag them out. So you can kind of scoop along Greensboro, scoop along that side, and then take out High Point. There's really not a scenario of this where you don't chop up a city or take out High Point. So you have something like this, which works fine. Oh yeah, so back to the Charlotte district. So the reason I prefer this to the traditional design is I think it makes sense to have Union and Cabarrus County in the same district, as well as the southern Charlotte suburbs. You could also draw in this right here, Huntersville area, but the problem with that is you have to stretch this area all the way up through here, and that goes from the Charlotte exurbs into the more areas type of Winston-Salem, right? So give an example of what that would look like. So let's get rid of this area right here. We're going to throw that in. So now we've got 31,000 extra people we got to deal with. And we've got to throw in... Actually, that could work. Let's try that. So I'm going to get rid of the tip right here. The one reason I wouldn't like to do this is because this is the lake area. So like, let me try and zoom out of this. So this is Lake Norman right here. Technically this area of Hickory area is also tied with the lake, but you'd be basically splitting this lake area into 3 different districts if you do what I'm talking about here. And then you'd be splitting over, throwing in part of the west, which just doesn't work. I don't think it's as fair as what I'm drawing right here. I could be wrong, but that's what I like doing. So this is the one way you can do this. So you basically draw out High Point, which is a Democratic-leaning city, but it's not overwhelmingly so. Like if I'll pull up High Point right here. So it's it's about 120,000 people or so, maybe at most, and they lean about 3 points Democratic on average. So let's pull up the election data just here for a second. Yeah, so it's about Democratic +6. But if you do this, you don't split any cities, right? So that's the reason I would draw it like this. The alternative is to keep Guilford County whole and just butcher instead Winston-Salem, which is in Forsyth County, which is much more conservative. Still leans Democratic, but the right Republican can win it statewide. It's not completely gone at this point. So the way you do is you basically draw something like this, where you kind of grab the areas near downtown. Honestly, you can almost kind of even go by race. So like you draw that out. The only problem is you split Winston-Salem down the middle, which is fine. It's not a bad thing to do, but it's worth noting. If you draw it like this, that's what has to happen. But I think I'm going to go with that because it's fine. It's just a personal preference that I like drawing it the other way. I'm actually not sure what percentage of High Point is university students. I know Guilford has a lot of universities. But like, regardless, it's not a huge city. There are Republicans in the city. I think one of the representatives is a Republican. Granted, the district's drawn in a strange way, but it's just kind of how it goes. Lock these two up again. So now we've only got 2 districts left. We got 13 and we got 14. So I'm going to start with 13 because that's easy. Incredibly easy. This district is a Republican vote sink in the truest definition of the term. Randolph and Davidson counties right here, these 2 counties right here, are the 2 most Republican large counties in the state. Whereas like Avery and Mitchell are the most historically Republican ones. These 2 counties right here are the most historically, are the largest ones that are competitive. And they have reasonably large populations. They're not, incredibly just rural counties. So that's kind of what this map looks like. Let's kind of zoom out and get a good picture of it. I have to back out to see what the district numbers are. And then I'm going to check to see what the partisan breakdown of each district is. So you got 1, 2, 3. I think this is a pretty decent split. But I think it's going to lean Republican on paper, right? So this looks pretty fair. On paper, it's an 8-6 Republican-Democratic map. The competitive swing seat would be number 14, because it has all of Cary, all of Apex, basically southern Wake County, which is extremely trending Democratic. It used to be more Republican, now it's not. So this would have gone to Trump by about 2.2%. Which I think is pretty good for a marginal seat, for the most competitive seat in the state. And it voted for Cooper by a similar margin. Voted for Richard Burr by a margin very similar to what he won by. It was very close in the AG race. So I think this is actually a fairly reasonable district in terms of lining up with how the state votes. But if you do notice, in 2008, it would have voted 4 points to the right of the state. So it would have been Republican leaning by a good margin back then. But that's kind of the North Carolina map. Trying to think what other state would want to do next. Georgia could be interesting. I could try a gerrymander. I've always liked drawing a gerrymander of states. But I don't know if there's anything else anyone else wants to see drawn. I can whip things up pretty quickly in all actuality. So let me go back to the display mode here. And so if you have any questions about the map, let me know or anything. This is kind of the baseline of what I've drawn for North Carolina. I think would be fair for a commission to draw in 2020. It's just weird on COI. Oh, communities of interest. What communities of interest? Yeah. No district in 14 is going to be completely free of communities of interest. So Chatham really, in all likelihood, lines up better with 4, right? It lines up with Chapel Hill. 2, I think it lines up well with Chatham. Technically, Lee and Harnett are both metropolitan Wake counties, but nobody really thinks of them that way. And then you've got what's that? Moore County right here and Montgomery, which could in theory go into 9. So like if you wanted to shift 9 into here, you could shift some of Johnston County, which is really more a Raleigh area, into. Actually, I'm going to go back to I just realized I'm showing it. So these two counties fit perfectly. This fits fine. These areas could go into 9, but that would make 9 more Republican, and that probably wouldn't be fair long term, because this current version of 9 is still Democratic by a substantial margin. It voted for Hillary Clinton by 6, so it wouldn't be a seat Republicans would be winning anytime soon. Whereas if you get rid of Columbus and Bladen here, so this is the alternative way to draw this. Is you have them take that, then have 9 take these right here. So all of a sudden that drops down to 49.4%. So that's that's a seat Republicans could take, especially with a candidate that can appeal to the Lumbee native tribe. The other seat Democrats would obviously have a chance in is 11. It would have voted for Trump by 12 points. It would have voted for Pat McCrory by only 2.6. So in theory, that's competitive. In practice, I don't know. It has trended substantially right since 2010. I know Democrats want to take back this area, but if you look at the actual district itself, basically the only Democratic areas in here now are Asheville, Watauga area, so Boone, a little bit around Huntersville, a little bit in Jackson County, which is a college area, and then a little bit in Swain, which is Native American reservation area. So it's just not fertile territory for Democrats long term. I guess we'll wait to see if I want to do another map or if I want to show something. No, Heath Schuler come back probably wouldn't work because I actually don't think he could clear a primary in that district, given it's going to be dominated by Asheville and Watauga County votes, which will be substantially more liberal than they used to be. I actually want to show off this map I just made, which I really like. It's an unfair map of New Mexico. So this district would have voted for, you can guess what this is. This is a Republican gerrymander of New Mexico. So 1 is Democrat plus 24. The other 2 are Republican plus 7. Trump would have won both by double digits, and both would have voted for even McCain in 2001 by identical margins. So this is the ideal Republican gerrymander of New Mexico, if you can call such a thing that. This little point right here is technically not. It does have a little bit of an escape route, so just something for fun right there. Yeah. Brad Parscale really needs to not look at New Mexico. It's not going to happen. Oh, this Connecticut one is pretty good as well. The 5th district here would actually be most likely to elect a Republican. It would have only voted for Obama by 1.9% in 2008, but right now it averages a 9-point Republican advantage in New England. So I think that this probably qualifies as, good. And to be fair, this 4 is pretty compact. It actually does fit entirely into that county right there. What else? Yeah, I have a ton of maps I don't ever use. I've been working on projects for quite a while. Here, I'll do a quick map real quick. Yeah, that's the third district. The third district is tricky because it seems to kind of flip just randomly every now and then. It is a Hispanic majority seat, although I don't think they're a majority of citizens. So who knows? Actually, while I'm here, I could kind of show some of the maps that I've made that I haven't actually published this project yet, but I made a fair map of every state in the country. So comparison of what an actual fair map of New Mexico would look like. So this is a pretty radical adjustment from the current one, kind of. So 3 here. Obviously, it's still similar to what it was. It's still actually, I think, a majority Hispanic seat. By race, it's very clearly majority Hispanic, but citizens, it's not. And then 2 and 1 are basically identically Democratic, but 1 is now almost all Albuquerque, and then 2 is the rural areas to the north, so it's got a maximal chance of having a Native American or Hispanic representative from that area. The current map kind of splits Albuquerque a little bit, which is I'm not a fan of. Oh, here's a gerrymander I made of Illinois, which I quite liked. It's quite easy to do Illinois because downstate is just kind of iffy for Democrats at this point. So the tricky thing with Illinois is trying to make it not go by presidential results because the Senate results are also important. Illinois is one of the last true vote-splitting states that regularly splits votes at a lot of different levels. So take the 12th district, for example, right here. It voted for Donald Trump by 34 percentage points, but it only voted for Mark Kirk by 8 percentage points. And it only voted for McCain in 2008 by 5. So this, even though this is an R+16 seat, it's one Democrats could theoretically compete in. Same with this one right here. It's a Trump +25 seat that only went for Mark Kirk by 7. The 6th district, like you see, a lot of the stories are pretty similar down here. As Trump overperforms compared to Mark Kirk, you go upstate, all of a sudden it's the exact opposite. So, for example, the 10th district here, Trump loses this seat by 13 points, but Mark Kirk wins it by 2. The 5th district here, Mark Kirk does 7 points better in the 5th district. The 6th district right here, it's only Democrat +3 at the presidential level. The Senate level, it's Republican +5. Another one right here, 2-point overperformance. So, like, you can see, Illinois is just a state that fascinates me because it is, politically swingy in terms of how it votes. My favorite seat here is the 14th because the 14th would have resulted in the end of Sherry Bustos. It's a Trump +8 seat that also went for Mark Kirk by around 8. So it's probably it's out of reach for her, in all likelihood. Ugh. One more, I think. I'll show. So these unfair maps I'm doing, I'm calling them unfair. They're not just the unfair maps project is unlike the fair one in that the unfair is realistic gerrymander. So I'm trying to keep incumbents in districts. I'm trying to keep their districts geographically similar, and I'm trying to just make sure that would work. So, for example, this Alabama map. This is the unfair version I've made. Obviously, it only has 1 Democrat. A fair map of Alabama would have 1 Democrat and 1 swing district. This one I made to keep all of their fairly similar, so that the current incumbents would keep their seats. Which means the 2nd district as it exists right now, that whoever wins that race in the 2nd district will be gone. So, in the current map, Terry Sells' district is the 7th. I move her into the 2nd just to make it even more impossible for a Republican to win the 2nd. And then so numerically, all the districts here are pretty similar. So 1 takes in a swath of 2, 3 takes in a swath of 2, and then 6 and 2 also take in good portions of 2. So all of the incumbents are safe here, and none of the districts are competitive. R+19, 17, 30, 18, 18, none of them are competitive. So that's a kind of a sneak peek at my unfair maps project. The unfair Maryland is very similar. Andy Harris is kept in his seat. They gain a seat in the north of Maryland, where they should. And then the 7th district just snakes around Annapolis and Baltimore suburbs. And Republicans win there as well. I think my voice is getting kind of weak for some reason. But But yeah, if anyone has any other questions about anything, otherwise I might just go ahead and shut it off. Ugh. All right, I think that'll probably be it for tonight. My voice is kind of getting a little bit weak for some reason. No idea why. I'm not talking about anything too much. Yeah, 8-0 Maryland's not happening because they have to cross the bay. If it did happen, I would hope that some other Republican state would make up for it. Maybe, Nebraska will get rid of the 1st district, which is actually really easy to do. So I'll answer Adam first, then Nick. So Virginia's due for a redesign, right? I think that goes without saying that Virginia's current map it's a compromise map. It's not great. I'll pull up the fair map I made of Virginia, which I think is pretty good. I think it's a good baseline for what you could go off of. Oh, excuse me. So what I've done with this map is I've kind of tried to keep something similar. I've tried to keep regions pretty intact. I think it could be a mild Republican gerrymander, but I'm not really sure because the 2nd still leans Democratic on average by a good margin. I mean, like it would have voted for Trump by I think 1.9%. So that's the problem with the Virginia map is that it's hard to make a 2nd district there without drawing into the 3rd, which is a majority-minority district. You can't do that. So this map, obviously 8, 11, and 10 are not competitive at all. On the Democratic side, also 4 and 3 are very safe Democratic. And then on the Republican side, 1 is very safe. It would have voted for Corey Stewart by 7. 6 is also similar, would have voted for Corey Stewart by 9. And then 5 becomes different. Also, the 7th district is actually the swing one here. I forgot I did this. So the 7th district has all of kind of the rural areas, and then it has Chesterfield County, and then it goes into Charlottesville. And the result is a seat that leans Republican, but only by the smallest of margins. So really this map would have 2 seats for Democrats to take over, would be 2 and 7, would be their targets. Yeah, it's splitting the valley, I know, it's tricky. I don't like, because I would prefer a district that had Charlottesville and Lynchburg in the same area. They just kind of stretch from the mountains up, but that's not doable. And you can't really draw one that's just the Maryland, the Richmond suburbs, because that kind of has to go into 4. So I don't know. That's kind of what I went off of. I think whatever is drawn will be pretty fair. Oh, so what would you do with Loudoun? Because would you draw 10 Loudoun into Fairfax and Prince William into Fairfax? Because in that case, Fairfax County does not have its own district, right? So if I go up here, Fairfax, the 11th district here is contained entirely within Fairfax County. You could very easily draw one so the 10 goes into here and then 11 stretches down to there. Chocolatine County. What's Chocolatine County? I've never heard of this Chocolatine County. What I drew the line at is just demographically. Alternatively, what you could do is you could draw more of Loudoun and draw up to Leesburg, and then draw out this red area of Prince William County right here. And so kind of stretch it up through that way. You have to split Loudoun. It's either Loudoun gets split or Prince William gets split. I personally prefer to have a district entirely in Fairfax County. That's just what I prefer, because I think if a county is big enough to have an entire district within it, it probably should have a district entirely in it, right? Interesting, Prince William over Loudoun. All right, let's do that. Let's try that out real quick. So I have to get rid of 175,000 people here. So let's try this. That's close. I don't want to take over Manassas at all. Still not enough. Maybe take a little bit of Loudoun over here. So like go over here. And then throw this part back into. That's still not enough. Something like that. There. That better? And that doesn't look too bad. I don't like that little snake that goes in through Fairfax County, but I guess that works if you want to keep the suburban areas. And that does turn this district substantially. It makes the 6th several bits more conservative. You like what I did before, or you like what I did now? Originally, yeah. That's the tricky thing, because the alternative, and it's a good alternative, is to just draw part of the district is to split Fairfax County into parts with Prince William and parts with Loudoun. But in that case, you have to take a county that should have a single district within it, and you have to take a district away from it. You have to split Fairfax basically 3 ways, which is just kind of weird for a I mean, it really doesn't work, in my opinion. Now let's see what Nick said up above about standard for contiguity. So, in theory, I prefer to have bridges. I prefer to go over bridges, right? So, I don't like the district here. I really do not like having the Virginia Panhandle, or the Eastern Shore of Virginia, which should be which, if we're clear, the Eastern Shore of Virginia should be part of Maryland, and this part of Maryland should be part of Delaware. This is logical. It makes sense. I don't know why it's not a thing. But regardless, this is part of Virginia. If you're going by land contact, it should go by bridge, be connected to Virginia Beach, because there's a gigantic bridge that goes from Virginia Beach to the Eastern Shore. Problem is that doesn't make a whole lot of sense for what these are. These are very rural areas. And also there wasn't always a bridge there. So I have them connected to one, and you can go to it by ferry. The problem with requiring a bridge is that not everywhere that you can connect has a bridge. And more importantly, that's a ridiculous standard because lots of lakes, lots of areas with small numbers of people are not connected by land. So what I go by is a modified, I guess. I try to hope there's a bridge, right? I hope there's a bridge. If there's not a bridge, I try to avoid splitting over. So, like, for example, there are districts in California. There are some districts in California that go by bridge that I don't think should go by bridge. So, for example, some of them are in the Bay Area. So, see if I can pull this up. Where was it? So take, for example, the 5th District. It crosses over from Napa County into Contra Costa by bridge. I don't like that, just as on a personal level, I do not like that it crossed over the water. But it's a thing, it's real, that's what happened. So for me personally, I avoid that sort of thing. If there's a ferry, great. If there's a bridge, great. Otherwise, I try not to rely on bridges. I try not to split, I try not to split areas that don't make sense. That's just my kind of continuity standard. Now, I saw Andrew said that, oh, interesting, there was a small war between Maryland and Virginia that Maryland won, and that's a compromise. Yeah, these lines, I've drawn a map of the United States before, and whenever I draw them, I always remove the eastern shore from Virginia and give it to Maryland, and then I always add this portion of Maryland, which is divided, again, by bridge. These bridges weren't always here. I move this portion in with Delaware, where it should be. Although, granted, there are, of course, portions of Delaware that are where New Jersey is, for whatever reason. And then, of course, you've got some areas that are impossible, like Liberty Island is a very famous one, where the Liberty Island itself is part of New York, but the reclaimed land is part of New Jersey. It's nonsensical, but it is what it is. So I'll try to give an example of a map that I drew with the continuity stuff. I know Adam was not a fan of my gerrymander of New York that involved splitting a bridge in half. So I'm not going to show that one. I'm going to show this fair map of California I did. So what I did with the Bay Area is I tried to avoid splitting a bridge, splitting over water, like going from the North Bay to the South Bay. Hopefully this will load. Yeah, Florida 20. If we're being real, Mario Diaz-Balart's district should be based in Hialeah, and it should be almost 90-95% Hispanic, most of them Cuban. Instead, it crosses the Everglades to kind of dilute the Hispanic vote just a little bit. I don't think you should be able to cross the Everglades. But that's technically crossable. There are ways you can get there. It's just there are two people that live completely different areas. I reject that idea that makes sense. To kind of show you what he's talking about here, Florida's congressional districts were redrawn by a court. Also some of the stuff was ridiculous. The 20th is insane. That's the one where basically it crosses from this portion of Broward through nothing. Nobody lives here at all. Nobody lives in this area. It's literally wasteland. Into here, and then again, over nowhere, into here. That's absurd. But also it does the same thing here. This crosses from Hialeah and some Cuban areas into Collier and especially Hendry, which is a rural area. Completely nonsensical. The 5th district is also similar. I despise this district. It should not exist. This is a court-drawn indention. It's not a reasonable district. Tallahassee to Jacksonville doesn't make sense as a concept. It's not even majority African-American. It's only 40%. So this district shouldn't exist. But that was a court order. So here's my California map. So if you'll notice here, I did not cross over from the Bay Area. I crossed over when needed. So when I did so, I crossed over from this portion where it was required, from 10 to 11. So I crossed over from, rather than crossing from here to here, I crossed from here to here. Similar around there. And then if you go down to the south, currently the way it's drawn in San Diego, yeah, so this portion right here, as I drew in, you can technically draw this little sliver of 50 into 51. It wouldn't really matter. The current map does it this way. I did it this way as well. It's not a huge deal. But as an example of how you sometimes can't connect by water, or by land, look at all these islands. These islands have to go in a district. The Channel Islands have to go somewhere, even though people only live in this area right here, Avalon. So I just threw it in with this area of Rolling Hills Estates. So basically South LA County, one of the less liberal Democratic areas. And that just connects by ferry or by helicopter, by plane, whatever the rich people there do. Yeah, there should be a majority-minority district in Jacksonville. I believe I've drawn as such in my fair map of Florida, which exists because I have a fair map of every state. All my maps are very fair, and I mean that seriously. They split right down the middle. If you were to draw a seat in Jacksonville, you would draw in mostly the Hispanic, or not the Hispanic, the black areas. So this goes all the way over here. It cuts out these cities over here, Jacksonville Beach, and then it cuts off around this area right here. This 4th district, if I were to look at it right now, add CVAP because I drew this before CVAP was the thing. It's technically majority white, but it's a Democrat plus 1 seat. It would have voted for Obama twice, and it would have voted for Hillary Clinton once by 5. It's probably a seat a black Democrat would hold. For example, the former mayor of that county of Jacksonville would probably have won and would have run and would have won. He was a conservative Democrat. Would have done fine. And then the second also returns to being competitive here. It's a 6.6 seat. This is what basically the district Gwen Graham won in 2014 before she lost, and then basically had her political career ended by Andrew Gillum. Notice what I've drawn here. Instead of having the Everglades crossing districts, I drew 25 entirely in Hialeah. So this is actually a district. It would be a fascinating district today. So it would have voted for Hillary Clinton by 4 points. Would have voted for Rubio by 19 points. The district's 90% Hispanic, the vast majority of them Cuban. Would have voted Republican by a considerable margin in 2018 again. So it would be a very competitive district on paper, but Mario Diaz-Balart would have an advantage there. Same thing, 26 is probably gone in this map because Rubio would not have won it. But on the flip side, 27 becomes much more competitive in my map because it has all of South Miami, Hispanic areas. It's a Hillary plus 20 seat that almost went to Rubio, so that would be a competitive area to look at. Florida's a hard state to draw. I do not like drawing Florida at all. I get really annoyed trying to draw it because there's so little land with so much people, and you can't really draw it ever draw it perfectly. So like poor Gainesville, liberal Gainesville gets stuck in the 3rd district. All the Panhandle Trump conservatives. Poor Gainesville is just stuck here as like this liberal enclave and basically an entirely conservative seat. Like if you were to take Gainesville out of the 3rd district as I've drawn it, it's a Republican plus 23 seat. This is a district Trump gets 72% of the vote in. Whereas in Gainesville, he only got 36%. But you throw Gainesville in, it goes from Trump plus 25, Republican plus 25 to Republican plus 11. So, not great for Democrats, but what can you do? Oh, I actually got to check one thing with my Texas map. CVAP has made it easier to draw maps of Hispanic areas because generally the Hispanic district has to have a certain portion CVAP. You can't even go by voting age population because if you do that, you're going to get districts that don't elect Hispanics, even though Hispanics are a majority. So what you have to go by is CVAP. So my 23rd district here is 70% Hispanic. As of 2017, throw in CVAP again. 62%. Yeah, 62% would work. And this district, this 62% Hispanic district, would have voted for Trump by 11 points, like the Hialeah district. VRA district does not mean Democrat district. Just FYI as to what that means. Another example of the VRA district does not equal Democrat district would be in my, I believe it's a 22nd district or 21st district in California that I've drawn. Citizen voting, just the population, is majority Hispanic, 52%. But the district as a whole would have voted for Trump by a percentage point and would lean Republican by a reasonable margin. So, like David Valadao would be very safe in this version of the 21st district compared to what exists right now. Those are the maps I have right now. I have literally 3 or 4 other accounts with old maps that I have. I just go through Dave's redistricting map stuff like crazy. So I figured if I'm going to draw something productive and do it on stream, see how that goes. So yeah, if you have any other questions or comments, let me know. I'll be on for a few more minutes and I'll answer anything. Well, I enjoy this gigantic thing of pretzels. This thing is incredible, by the way. Honestly, the most annoying thing with this chat is it's like 20 seconds behind. So I can't actually get live comments. I have to wait a little bit to get an actual response. So... Alright, I think that would probably do it then. Thanks to the people who showed up. I might do this again sometime. I might not. I was just kind of bored, so figured why not.